It was supposed to last months. That was the belief in 1939. When the armies of Nazi Germany marched into Poland, the world witnessed speed, coordination, and overwhelming force. Tanks rolled like thunder. Aircraft screamed across the sky. Cities collapsed in days. Europe trembled. This was blitzkrieg, lightning war. Fast, brutal, decisive. Within 2 years, most of Europe lay under German control. France had fallen. The Low Countries were crushed. The Balkans were subdued. German flags flew over capitals that had stood for centuries. Many believed the war was already decided. But wars are not won in months. They are decided by years, by resources, by endurance, by strategy, and by mistakes. And the greatest mistake of all was overconfidence. At the center of it stood one man, Adolf Hitler. He believed Germany was destined to rule Europe. He believed his army was unstoppable. He believed his enemies were weak, divided, and morally inferior. For a time it looked like he was right. But power without limits breeds fatal errors. The war that Germany started in 1939, the global catastrophe known as World War II, would ultimately consume the very empire that launched it. By 1945, Berlin was rubble. German cities burned. Millions were dead. The Reich that promised 1,000 years lasted only 12. So what happened? How did the most feared military machine in the world collapse so completely? Was it poor strategy? Industrial weakness? Too many enemies? Or did Germany lose the war the moment it chose to fight the entire world at once? The answer is not simple, because Germany did not lose for one reason. It lost because of a chain reaction of catastrophic decisions. It lost because it underestimated its enemies. It lost because it overestimated itself. And it lost because modern war is not only fought with tanks and bullets, it is fought with factories, oil, supply lines, alliances, intelligence, weather, and time. At its peak in 1941, Germany controlled territory stretching from the Atlantic coast to deep inside Eastern Europe. But that same year marked the turning point, because instead of consolidating power, Hitler expanded the war. He invaded the Soviet Union. He declared war on the United States. He committed his forces to multiple massive fronts simultaneously. No empire in history had successfully fought that kind of war for long. Germany tried anyway. And the cost was unimaginable. Entire divisions vanished in the snow of Russia. Entire cities were flattened by Allied bombers. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. What began as a campaign of dominance slowly became a struggle for survival. The myth of invincibility shattered piece by piece. But here is the most important truth. Germany did not collapse overnight. It bled out. Through failed invasions. Through resource shortages. Through strategic miscalculations. Through enemies who grew stronger while Germany grew weaker. By the time Allied troops crossed into German territory in 1945, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The question was only how much destruction would come before the end. To understand Germany's defeat, we must look beyond the battlefield headlines. We must examine the fatal decision to invade eastward, the industrial power of America, the resilience of the Soviet war machine, the air war that destroyed German cities, the strategic disasters that drained manpower, and the moment when Germany began fighting a war it could never mathematically win. This is not just a story of tanks and generals. It is a story of ambition outrunning capability, of ideology overpowering logic, of a regime that believed speed could replace sustainability, and of how one of history's most powerful military forces collapsed under the weight of its own decisions. In the next chapter, we begin with the decision that many historians call the greatest strategic mistake of the entire war, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Because once Germany opened that eastern front, the clock began ticking. The Eastern Gamble, Operation Barbarossa. On June 22, 1941, German forces launched the largest land invasion in human history. Operation Barbarossa targeted the Soviet Union. Over 3 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and hundreds of aircraft struck at dawn, intending to crush the Soviet Union in weeks. Initial progress was staggering. Soviet divisions were encircled, cities fell, and German generals reported rapid victories. For a time, it seemed that the Soviet state would collapse like France had. But the Soviet Union was not France. Distance, harsh winters, and a scorched earth strategy turned the invasion into a nightmare. Factories were relocated east of the Urals, infrastructure destroyed, and reinforcements arrived from across the country. German supply lines stretched thin, freezing equipment and starving soldiers. By late 1941, the German advance slowed near Moscow. The Red Army counterattacked, forcing the Wehrmacht to retreat. Millions of troops were lost, tanks destroyed, and the myth of invincibility shattered. Operation Barbarossa did not fail immediately, but strategically it sealed Germany's fate. The Eastern Front became a war of attrition Germany could not sustain. America enters the war. December 7, 1941, brought a new global dimension. Pearl Harbor. The United States declared war on Japan, and Hitler, believing America weak and divided, declared war on the United States. The result was catastrophic for Germany. American industry, vast and inexhaustible, began producing tanks, aircraft, trucks, and munitions at a scale Germany could not match. Supplies reached the Soviets through Lend-Lease, strengthening the Eastern Front, while the Allies bombed German industrial centers, oil refineries, and transport networks. Germany's blitzkrieg advantage eroded. Fuel shortages grounded tanks. Aircraft were destroyed or unusable. The balance of production had shifted irreversibly. Germany faced a two-front war it could never win. By 1943, the Allies' bombing campaigns devastated German cities. Strategic bombing targeted factories, rail lines, and oil refineries, crippling production and logistics. Fuel scarcity paralyzed panzer divisions. Rail destruction hindered troop and supply movements. The Luftwaffe could not defend against the sheer volume of bombers. Civilian morale collapsed. Food shortages, constant air raids, and destroyed infrastructure created chaos. Germany was no longer dictating the pace of the war. It was reacting, defending, and retreating. Stalingrad, D-Day, and the two-front collapse. Late 1942 marked the Battle of Stalingrad. Hitler's insistence on capturing the city led to the encirclement and surrender of the German Sixth Army. Losses were catastrophic. Over 90,000 troops captured and morale shattered. Meanwhile, in the West, Operation Overlord, D-Day, opened a second front. Allied forces landed in Normandy, overcoming fortifications and pushing into France. Germany now fought a two-front war it could never sustain. Supplies, reinforcements, and trained troops were insufficient to respond to multiple simultaneous attacks. By early 1945, Germany's military was exhausted, fragmented, and under constant pressure. Soviet troops advanced from the east, while Americans, British, and Canadians pressed from the west. Cities lay in ruins. Fuel and ammunition were scarce. Communication between fronts broke down. Hitler's decisions were increasingly irrational, ideological, and disastrous. The Battle of the Bulge in late 1944 was Germany's last offensive gamble, quickly turning into defeat. German forces were encircled and destroyed. By April 1945, Berlin itself was surrounded, and Hitler's bunker symbolized the isolation and desperation of a regime in collapse. Germany's surrender in May 1945 was inevitable. Its defeat was the result of overextension, strategic blunders, industrial inferiority, resource shortages, relentless Allied pressure, and the inability to adapt to a global war. Germany's defeat is not just a story of military failure. It is a cautionary tale about hubris, ideology, and the limits of power. From the victories of 1939 to the ruin of 1945, every success contained the seeds of failure. Blitzkrieg could not overcome vast distances, harsh winters, and industrial shortages. Ideology replaced strategy. Expansion replaced consolidation. Hitler's decisions, invading the Soviet Union, declaring war on the United States, fighting on multiple fronts, and ignoring sound military advice, created a domino effect that led to inevitable collapse. Strategic miscalculations, industrial limitations, and relentless Allied offensives combined to destroy the Third Reich. By the war's end, Germany was a shadow of its former self. Cities burned. Millions were dead. The Wehrmacht lay shattered. Civilians endured starvation and terror. The dream of a 1,000-year Reich lasted only 12 years. The lessons are timeless. No matter how advanced or feared, ambition without limits, arrogance, and miscalculation can destroy even the most powerful nations. Victory requires logistics, strategy, foresight, and humility. Germany's defeat remains one of history's most compelling examples of how human error and overreach can undo empires. The Third Reich fell not in a single battle, but through a cascade of decisions, errors, and relentless opposition. It was the result of overexpansion, industrial weakness, misjudging enemies, and fighting wars on too many fronts. It was a lesson in hubris, overreach, and the unforgiving mathematics of total war. And in the ashes of defeat, the world learned that no army, no ideology, and no leader can defy the combined forces of strategy, resources, and time indefinitely. Germany lost. Europe and the world survived, and history remembered.